Hey guys, it's Chloe. Welcome back, or welcome to my channel. In today's video, I have a really exciting Tacoma interior mod for you guys, and I'm actually sitting on it right now. It is an underseat air compressor mount by Desert Does It, and yet again, Desert Does It has knocked it out of the park with this product. I absolutely love it, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys it in more detail. I'm going to show you how it works, show you what air compressor I have underneath the seat, and I'm going to show you complete instructions of how I install this mod, including all the wiring and mounting. Real quick, if you like Tacoma mod videos and off-road videos with Tacomas, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of off-road and mod videos coming up for you guys soon. So this is the entire mod. It's actually really low profile, which I like. As you can see, there are no visible wires, and the mount is just pretty sleek overall. Before I fire up my air compressor to show you guys how this works, I want to show you guys a little bit more detail about this. So right here we have an attachment for an air hose, and there's a really nice cutout in the mount for this. There's a bunch of empty slots, which I like for extra mounting. And as you can see, we have an integrated switch right here, which again, there's a cutout for in the mount, and I really like. Now I have the switch here only wired up to actually turn the compressor on when the ignition is on. Of course, you don't have to wire it up that way, but in any case, I really like the location of the switch. I think it is very clever. I haven't seen anything like this, and it's really nice that it's just right here because this is where your hose goes. Now you might be wondering how you can fit an air compressor underneath this seat. And by the way, believe it or not, you can even fit an ARB twin under here. But anyways, this is made possible by using Desert Does It's front seat jackers as well as rear seat jackers. And if you haven't checked out my video where I installed these front seat jackers and the rear seat jackers, this was honestly the most game-changing mod I've ever done to my Tacoma. This makes your legs so comfortable. The driving experience isn't the same ever since I've had these. Now what I really like about the design of this mount is that you can move the seat fully forward or fully backwards. And there's no interference whatsoever to the air compressor, so your adjustability isn't affected at all. Also, as you can see, we're in the rear here and I have the seat pushed all the way forward, and as you can see, there's no interference whatsoever, no wires, you can't see anything, and you can't even tell that anything's really there. Now I want to give a demonstration of this to you guys because it's really cool, and it's really simple too. So if you needed to air up or you just wanted some air, you take your air hose and simply put it in the connector and then turn your ignition on. As you can see, the light on the switch turns on to let you know that the ARB can be used. As you can see, it's turned off, but if I press the switch, so that's how simple it is to use. So I know a lot of you guys that watch the channel also have Tacomas as well. So if you're curious on the compatibility of this underseat air compressor mount, it works with all 2005 and up Tacomas, so all second and third gen Tacomas. Desert Does It also sells these underseat air compressor mounts for all 2003 up 4Runners, 2003 up Lexus GXs, and all FJ Cruisers. Desert Does It is also working on a mount that's going to be available for Tundras come March 2021. As you can see, I have a single ARB mounted under there, and it actually fits with quite a bit of room. But if you even have a twin ARB, it actually fits underneath your seat, and Viair air compressors also fit with this air compressor setup. Now as you can see, I have this mounted over here on my driver's side, but you can also mount it underneath the passenger side seat. And what I absolutely love about this mount is that you don't necessarily have to mount an air compressor in it. You can mount ham radio equipment in it, inverters, amps, lock boxes, you name it. Now this isn't my first Desert Does It product, but I absolutely love Desert Does It, and a big part of that is because they're actually a company that's made up of a few Tacoma enthusiasts just like you and me, and they're a small business that really focuses on quality American-made products. I know that the materials they use to actually create their products is US sourced, and all of their products are created here in the US. And you can just tell that they really care about quality because every single Desert Does It product that I've gotten comes with the highest grade bolts that you can pretty much get. You should check out their website because they're pioneering a lot of really cool and unique products, so I'll have their website in the description down below. So I wanted to show you guys what I have underneath the seat right here. I know it looks like a lot, but most of it is actually just wiring. So first off, obviously the big thing is we have the ARB air compressor. As you can see, I have a couple of fittings that connect the air line to the outside of the mount, and there's a nice slot cut out on the mount so that you can actually connect your air hose to. And everything else here is pretty much just wiring. So if you're interested in understanding what all of these wires do, or you're curious on how I wire this up, I show you guys that completely in the install. I explain what every single wire does, and I show you exactly how I routed the wires underneath the seat to the fuse panel and the firewall. So to replicate my setup, here are all the things that I have. First off, I have the actual air compressor itself, which is an ARB high output onboard air supply. And in this kit, you actually get the air compressor itself, which in my case is just the single ARB, not the twin ARB. You also get the ARB air filter. There's two different wiring harnesses in this kit. One is going to be for the switch we're gonna wire up. Then the larger wiring harness is going to wire the compressor to the battery. It also connects to the switch and the pressure sensor on the compressor. Lastly, there is a bag that has the little ARB switch that I talked about earlier. And the rest of the bag pretty much has some connectors that we're gonna need, some mounting hardware, as well as the relay. The next thing I have is the ARB air compressor pump up kit. And this is basically just to provide the actual hose itself, as well as a bunch of fitments. So we have the air hose, which is 6 meters long, and a couple different fitments and attachments that we're going to need during the install. Last up, I have my Desert Does It underseat air compressor mount. We're gonna need front seat jackers, which I already have in the truck, so I'll show you guys those when we get inside. And you're gonna need the rear seat jackers, which I have right here. And lastly, the kit from Desert Does It also comes with some zip ties, an airline, as well as a couple of attachments. So aside from the 3 kits that I just showed, I also picked up some extra wiring accessories because I anticipate that we're going to have to run some wires pretty long. First off, I just have some 5-gauge wire. This is so that I can reach the battery. I also have some 14-gauge wire in red, black, and blue that I think I'm gonna need to reach the switch into the fuse panel. And speaking of the fuse panel, what I'm gonna use are these mini out-of-circuit fuses. I picked up 2 of these from Tractor Supply Company because there's pretty much 2 wires that come out of the switch. There's an ignition wire and an illumination wire. And I believe unlike the actual fuse box itself, the fuse panel, which is inside the truck, actually only has these mini fuses. So I didn't have these lying around in my garage, so I had to pick up 2 sets of these for both of the wires. Lastly, just to neaten things up, I do have some heat shrink tubing. So the very first thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna pop up the hood and get to the battery because we're gonna wanna disconnect the negative battery terminal. And this is just because we're unwiring the seats. We're gonna be dealing with other wiring with the compressor. So this is a good thing to do. I'm using a 10mm wrench for this. And then once you loosen the nut, you should be able to pop off this terminal. Now, as you can see, I have a very small plastic bag here, and I'm actually going to wrap this terminal in it just so it doesn't make any contact and do my best to tuck it away for now. So now we're inside the truck. I want to install my air compressor on the driver's seat. So what we're going to need to do is remove the seat, and as you can see, I already have my Desert Does It front seat jackers installed on the driver's seat. But regardless of whether you have seat jackers installed already or not, we still need to remove the seat. So for this first bolt, I have a 15mm socket, and I'm using my breaker bar. This bolt in the rear here is going to need a 14mm socket. So the next step is to remove the wiring harnesses underneath the seat so that you can actually take the seat out of your truck. Now it's really hard to show this to you guys because it's so dark underneath the seats. So what I'm gonna do is remove that wiring, take out the seat, and then show you guys what I undid. So as you can see here under the seat, there are only 2 wiring harnesses I had to unplug from the seat itself. The first one right here, the yellow one, is the airbag wire, and the second one I believe is for the seatbelt chime. Now before we get to mounting the air compressor on the underseat air compressor mount itself, the last thing we're gonna have to do are install front seat jackers if you don't have them installed already. This is super simple to do, and like I said, I have a whole video showing you guys how to do this. So if you're unsure, you can go reference that video before we move on to the next step. So next we're going to mount our air compressor onto our Desert Doesn't mount, and I'm using this diagram provided by Desert Doesn't to reference where I should mount my air compressor. So again, I have this single ARB, which is A, so I'm gonna be mounting it in this location over here. So to do that, you're gonna use a 4mm Allen wrench, and you're gonna loosen these pinch bolts. Now as you can see, this freely rotates, so we're going to rotate it 90 degrees, and then we're going to retighten down our pinch bolts. I'm using the hardware provided by Desert Doesn't to mount our air compressor onto our mount. So next up, we're gonna take these fittings, which came with our Desert Doesn't mount, and this pressure sensor, which came in the kit with the air compressor. We're basically gonna connect all of these things together so that we can actually get air running outside of the mount. So first, we're gonna just remove this red plastic piece from the compressor. Then we're gonna take one of these 90-degree MPT fittings, and we're gonna put it in the same exact spot that our red plastic piece came in. You will still end up with a couple of threads showing because the ends are tapered, and they basically want to allow you to basically mount and point this wherever you want. Next, we're gonna get onto the side of the mount, and we're gonna take our bulkhead fitting. We're gonna put it through the Desert Doesn't mount with one washer on each side. Next, we're gonna take our T-piece, which the pressure sensor is going to fit into, and we're gonna thread that through our bulkhead fitting. Also, by the way, the bulkhead fitting is a 7/8 wrench, and the T-piece is a 19mm wrench. Now, as you can see here, I adjusted this T-piece so that this end was facing horizontally. As you can see, we have a couple of terminals, and that's where we're gonna wire things. So I wanted to make sure these weren't facing up so that we didn't put too much stress on these wires. Next, we're gonna take our other 90-degree MPT fitting, and we're gonna fit that into this T-piece right here. Again, we're still gonna have a couple of threads showing because, like I said, the ends are tapered on these. The last thing we're gonna do is connect our air line from this MPT fitting to this MPT fitting. I'm actually going to remove the air line for now, test this setup, and then once I ensure that this works and everything else is good, I'll cut this air line to make it a more appropriate size. The last thing we're gonna do before we get into the truck and put this mount in is we're going to thread this piece through our bulkhead fitting, and this piece basically just connects to the air hose. So I just put the entire setup in the truck. It's not fully mounted down and bolted down yet, because I do want to finish the wiring before we finalize everything, but one more thing that we need to add are our rear seat jackers. Now, the rear seat jackers I'm using are the 3/4 inch ones. You need to use at least this size or you're not going to be able to clear this entire setup. Since, like I said, I'm not bolting anything down, I'm just going to slide them in where they're going to go. One last part that we're going to mount is the air filter, which is just this small piece right here. Now, it's really easy to mount because all we're going to do is take off this red plastic cap. Once we take that off, all we're going to do is screw it in. And another benefit I really like about this underseat air compressor mount is that there is still quite a bit of room on the sides of the air compressor. To be honest, I don't anticipate that I'm going to be changing this air filter that much because this thing is sitting inside the truck. But if I did, all I'd have to do is remove the seat and there's a lot of room for me to work with. So the next part of this project is going to be wiring everything all together, which I'm really excited about because I majored in electrical and computer engineering in college. There is quite a bit of wiring to do, so I'm gonna make a diagram and show it to you guys, kind of a high level of how I'm gonna wire everything together, just because there's a lot of different components, so you can use that diagram along with a more detailed diagram that's provided in the ARB instructions to hopefully get a clearer picture and help you out. Now, as for the wiring, there's first off this pretty giant harness, and pretty much one end of this has terminals that are going to connect to the battery. So we are gonna have to mount this from the air compressor through the firewall to underneath the hood to reach the battery. Pretty much the only other things that we're going to have to connect to this wiring harness is this connector right here, which we're actually gonna kind of have to build, which is going to connect to the wiring harness for the switch. And we're gonna also have to hook up the air pressure sensor to the wiring harness as well. The switch has its own wiring harness, and we're gonna get into more detail about exactly what to wire where, but pretty much the switch is going to sit on the side of the air compressor mount where it's easy to access. So for the switch, I'm gonna actually try to tap into the fuse panel, which is located right behind this. So that pretty much means we're gonna have to have wires routed from here to here and to the battery. So if we actually take a look underneath this mount, you can see that this is where the airbag wire and the seatbelt wire go through. And as you can see, it goes underneath the carpet. And then if we actually pop this plastic panel off, those wires come through here and then get routed up this panel and through the firewall back there. We're gonna run both wiring harnesses that came with the kit through the carpet here, underneath the panel, and then for the switch we'll be able to tap into here so everything will be clean and hidden. And then for the battery wires, we're going to route them through the firewall. So we're gonna start with tackling the wiring on this big wire first. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to take our relay that was provided in the ARB kit, and we're gonna connect it to this connector over here. Next, we're gonna tackle this connector, which is going to be for our switch, and these are the corresponding wires that we're going to have to hook up to this connector. So I think the best way to do this is to look at the wiring harness for the switch. So what I'm gonna do is line up this connector from the switch wiring harness to my empty connector right here. And then I'm going to look at the back of my switch wiring harness, and I'm going to match the colors on the other side. So as you can see here, our red wire is at the bottom in the corner, so we're gonna match that up from this harness. And then we're gonna do the same with all 4 colors. So now we're gonna wire up our switch, and I do want to point out that on this wiring harness, there are actually wires for 3 switches. There's a switch 1, a switch 2, and the isolating switch. We're only gonna be focusing on the isolating switch, and according to ARB's manual, switch 1 and switch 2 are for front and rear air locker switches, which we don't have in this kit and I'm not gonna be using. So we're not gonna have to wire any of these wires up at all, and we're just gonna put them aside. So the only wires we're gonna be concerned with are the wires for the isolating switch, which there's a very nice diagram over here with how to get this all wired up. This end's gonna plug into the other harness, which we just put together. And these 2 wires are the ignition and the illumination wires, which we're going to have to solder longer wires to so that they can run all the way to the fuse panel. So as you can see on the back of the switch here, there's some numbers that label all of the terminals, and we're gonna be able to use the manual and follow what needs to be wired. So our 2 ground wires or black wires are gonna connect to 8 and 7. Our red and yellow wire is going to connect to 2. The blue and white wire is going to connect to 6. And then our red wire is going to connect to 3. Now in the truck, I'm going to start with my switch wiring harness, and I'm going to feed it through the slot that's made for the switch in the mount right here. As you can see, that fits really nicely in. And then we're not gonna worry about any of these other connections because we don't have 2 other switches. So we're just gonna deal with these 2 ends of the wiring harness. Now we're gonna take our really long wiring harness, and we're going to find the end with the switch connection right here. And as you can see, it's really, really long because most people run the switch far away from where they mount the air compressor, but that's not true in our case. So I'm gonna just wrap it a little bit to clean up some of the wiring. Eventually you're gonna hit the relay, which I'm gonna just keep here for right now. And then after that, you're gonna end up with all these other terminals on this end. Just so that this harness is easier to work with and less tangled up, I'm going to use some blue painter's tape to tape the wires together just to hold them in place. So as you can see, now I have this spool of the really long wiring harness kind of put down here just for now. What I'm going to do is connect the two wiring harnesses together. So this is the connection for the switches. Now that these two are connected, the only ends that we're concerned with from the switch wiring harness are the ignition and the illumination wire. So now in the middle of the large wiring harness, there's kind of these 4 different ends here. And luckily for us, we're only going to be concerned with these 2. So the yellow and black and green and black ends, we're not going to wire up because they deal with the switches. So we're going to tuck those away. This terminal is what's going to provide power to our air compressor. So we're going to take this terminal on the air compressor and we're going to plug that in. Now the very last wiring connection we're going to have to make within this mount is this red and blue wire, and these are going to connect to the pressure sensor over here that we previously mounted. So I'm going to remove that plastic cap. Now looking at the ARB instructions, it says to plug the 2 female spade terminals into any of the 2 compressor pressure switch terminals. The connection here for what wire goes where should not matter. I'm guessing it doesn't matter because the way this works is it measures air pressure by measuring the potential between these 2 ends. So now we have all the wiring that's going to be inside the mount completely done. Now I know this looks a little bit messy right now, but it's just because we have a bunch of these do not care switches, so we have a bunch of extra wires. But this is going to be pretty close, I think, to the final setup that I'm going to have for the wires. So just to recap, we have this large wire with our relay, and we first connected that all the way to our switch here outside, and then that wiring harness also connected to give our air compressor power, as well as connected to the pressure sensor. And basically all the things that we had left over are just these things at the end. These 2 we're going to have to make into longer wires, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to make this into a longer wire as well. But these 2 are gonna go to the fuse panel over here, and this longer one is going to go through the firewall to our battery. And this is the routing line I'm going to take. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to build up our wires for our switch. So as you can see here, I have some mini out-of-circuit holders, and pretty much I got this at Tractor Supply Company. And what these are going to do is connect the blue and that red wire that was coming out of the switch into the fuse panel. So as you can see, it has terminals that can connect into the fuse panel and one end that can connect to a wire. So we're going to use 2 new accessory fuses that did come in this kit. We're going to use a 5 amp and a 10 amp. We're going to take one of our out-of-circuit holders and we're going to insert this new accessory fuse into the top slot over here. We're going to do the same thing with the 5 amp. The next thing we're going to do is hook up these out-of-circuits that we just made to our fuse panel, which is actually just accessible down here. Also, one quick thing I wanted to mention is I did add new butt connectors at the end of these. These are just more waterproof than the other ones, so I just like them a little bit better, but it's just an optional step. So if we take a look under here, this is the actual fuse panel itself, and we just have to pop off the lid. So to do that, I'm inserting a flathead and then gently trying to pop it off. Should come right off and we can access all our fuses. Now what's great about the lid is it shows exactly the fuses we're going to need and it has them all labeled. So we're going to be tapping into this 5 amp, which is the panel for the dash illumination. And then we're also going to be tapping into this 10 amp ignition number 2, which is going to be for our ignition wire. So the 5 amp is the one on the end over here, and I'm using this little plastic tool that is underneath the lid in the fuse box under the hood. Now this is the stock fuse we just took out, and I thought I was going to be able to add it into our out-of-circuit, but the problem is the terminals are so short that we're actually not going to be able to secure it in. So I'm going to be using this other 5 amp fuse that came with this kit. Now the good thing is that these terminals still fit in the fuse panel up here, so we're still in good shape. So now we're going to put the 5 amp fuse in the same spot it was before, and same with the 10 amp fuse. These things are really hard to find in stores, so I'm going to try to find a pair on Amazon. So if I find one, I'll leave it in the description down below. Next up, what we're going to start doing is route wires through under the carpet so that they can go to their appropriate places. Like I said before, some of the wires that we have to route are the ignition and the illumination wire. These are very short, so I'm hoping that they'll fit through this hole and then come out underneath the carpet, and I'll be able to solder longer wires on there. I'm going to tape these guys together so that they can route together. So I'm gonna do my best to route these wires in this hole and follow this line. And I just felt one of the wires with my hand under the carpet, so I'm gonna try to pull them through. And I pulled them through to the other side, which is awesome. Now we're gonna do the same thing with our battery wire, except I don't want to be running the fuse under the carpet because it's obviously huge. So I'm gonna leave this with the mount. I'm gonna figure out where to put that later, but let's just run this through first. And these ones were a lot easier to find on the other side. So as you can see, we got both ends of our wire, which is great. So for a battery wire, you can clearly see that this is not going to be long enough to reach the battery. And also for our switch wires, our fuse wires are right over here. So obviously they're not gonna reach either. Now there's a couple different ways that we can add some wires to lengthen them so that they can reach the battery and the fuse panel. One thing that you can do if you're looking for something easy is just adding connectors. All you really have to do is plug in the wire and crimp it. But what I'm gonna try to do is cut lengths of wires that are gonna be long enough and then solder them. And I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. So now I'm gonna show you guys how to solder some wires. So as you can see, I soldered our blue wire into a longer blue wire, and now I'm gonna solder our red and yellow wire to a longer orange wire. So one of the most important things, or at least I think is one of the most important things, is to have a lot of light. So I have light coming from up top, and I have my extra Makita flashlight coming from the side. I also have this thing, and it's called the helping hands, and it's basically going to clamp down both of the wires and touch them together so that I don't have to deal with that, and I can just deal with holding the solder and my soldering iron. So I actually just stripped back some more of this wire so that it's more exposed, and now I'm going to strip some wire from the orange wire. And as you can see, this orange wire is a lower gauge than this other stock wire that we have from the ARB. So you do want to make sure that you're using at least a lower gauge wire or a thicker wire than the one you're going to be soldering to, or at least the same wire size. So you can just put them together and solder them like this, but what I like to do is lightly wrap my wires together so that they stay together even better. Once we have these two wires on the helping hands, we're going to take our soldering iron, which I've cleaned the tip with a slightly damp paper towel, and we're going to hold it onto the back of the wire ends, and then we're going to wait a couple seconds for the solder to heat up on the wires. And once it does, as you can see, I'm just adding a little bit. And then here's what the finished soldered connection looks like. I know some people don't like wrapping around and just putting the two wires on top of each other because, as you can see, they're a little bit twisted and a tiny bit bulky. But we're gonna cover this all up with heat shrink because we don't want these connections exposed anyways. But that is kind of a basic way how to solder. I'm sure there are lots of other YouTube videos out there if you want to get more information or see other techniques of how other people solder. Next up, we're gonna add some heat shrink to this connection to basically just cover it up. I'm using 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch, which is a little bit large, but it's still gonna do the job. And then this is the final product, so it looks pretty nice now. Now I'm just gonna take some electrical tape to keep these wires in place since they're gonna be kind of wired in the same place at the end. So now that I have these guys all taped up, they're going to connect to these two fuses up here. So I'm gonna cut them right here so that they're not super tight and there's not too much tension on them, because I could always push them back into the carpet a little bit more, but at their current length, they are way too long. So I'm gonna cut them here, and then we're gonna connect them up to the fuse panel. So our orange wire is going to go into our 10 amp fuse. And then our blue wire is our illumination that's going to go into our 5 amp fuse. So the last bit of wiring we're going to do are these 3 wires, which are going to go through the firewall and all the way to our battery. On the inside, the wires are going to be fed through the other side of this. They're going to come out of here, and we're going to be able to reach the battery. So it's pretty tight to fit those wires through there, so I actually took a knife and cut a very, very small slit. And looking back on the inside, if we rip the carpet back a little bit here, we're gonna feed the wires through a very small slit in here that I made. So I don't know if you can see, but there's a very small slit over here. So now I have all 3 wires taped up with some blue painter's tape so that we can hopefully see them really easily on the other side, and so that they all stay together. and this is the farthest they'll go, so I'm gonna have to reach and solder over here.
So now what I'm going to do is cut and strip these wires, and then I'm going to crimp them to terminals that will connect to the battery. I'm actually going to connect my ground to right here and my 12-volt lead to the battery itself. So I'm still going to leave quite a bit of slack on these wires. And obviously the black wire is going to be cut shorter than the red wire is. Now these are the two battery terminals I had, so I'm going to put them on the corresponding wires and then crimp the wires to them.
Okay, so now with all the wiring done, we're gonna try to turn on the truck and test this out. So it looks like at least the illumination light on the switch works, which is really cool. So now if we turn it on, we actually get air through here, which is awesome, which means our wiring is all good. And as you can see when I turn it on, this light also turns on. So to finish this install, I put all of my panels back into place, and then I went through all of the fittings and put some Teflon tape around the threads to help make them airtight. I also tightened them down with a wrench. One thing that I do want to note is that you should also test for air leaks by putting your hand around the fittings and seeing if you have one. While the air compressor is on, I did have one, so I just went back, found where the air leak was, and tightened down the fitting that caused it. Make sure to zip tie all your wires away once everything is finalized. Also, to ensure that you can fully move the seat forwards and backwards, keep an eye out on how you mount the factory wiring harness to the seat. Mounting it over the top rail will allow for more adjustability. Then, have fun playing with your air compressor and shooting air into your face. This is footage from my previous seat jackers video because the last step is to put the seat back into place and put the bolts through the seat jackers and torque them down like I've shown previously. But to recap, for the front seat jackers, I'm using the provided 15mm bolts, and for the rear, I'm using the longer 14mm bolts.
If you follow this install and have any questions whatsoever, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll do my best to answer, and if not, you can reach out to Desert Does It. They're really good at communicating back. I am beyond excited to actually get to use this air compressor next time I'm out on the trails. And while the install was medium, I think in terms of level, it still went smoothly, and I'm glad it came out great. I want to give a huge shout out to Desert Does It for sending me over this kit for this video. They are a great small business, and like I said before, the quality on all of their products across the board is phenomenal. I do have a discount code that you guys can use if you want to check out their website, and I'll have links to this product, the front seat jackers, and the rear seat jackers in the description box down below. Also, stay tuned for a future video where I'll be reviewing the single ARB air compressor. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to connect more with me, you can follow me on my Instagram. It is @ChloeKuoTaco. I post more in real time on there, so if you want live updates of what I'm doing, you can check that out. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!